Hey, Retcon Raider here. Well, it's already August, as hard as that might be to believe. I swear, it really feels like it was July just yesterday. But here we are, already almost halfway through the new month. In part, I suppose July went by so quickly because, all things considered, it was actually a fairly quiet month for the channel. I mean, as usual, the channel is still growing, but it's definitely losing a little momentum. Not enough to actually be concerning, mind you, not yet anyway, but it is a trend that I need to keep an eye on. That said, let's take a quick look at the numbers. Now, according to the analytics, we ended up pulling roughly 270 new subscribers and 72,000 global views back in July. Honestly, that's not bad, especially compared to the numbers we were seeing back when we first got started. Still, it is slightly lower than what we saw back in June, which of course was also lower than what we saw back in May. Like I said, it's a slow downward trend, brought on in part by my slightly slower upload schedule, but also because of some other factors, which we'll be talking about in just another moment. Looking at the top 10, it's no real surprise to see that Phoenix Point has once again topped pretty much all of my monthly charts. Love it or hate it, that's easily the game that seems to draw the most attention on my channel. Update and gameplay videos are pretty much a guaranteed 5,000 to 10,000 views. And even the lore videos, the weakest of my Phoenix Point videos, tend to clock in at roughly 3,000 views apiece. To put that into perspective, my other ongoing series tend to top out at about 1,000 views per episode. Pathfinder Kingmaker is also a pretty solid performer, but it's definitely a rather distant second to Phoenix Point. It was getting some pretty crazy numbers back in late 2018, when the beta was first released, but it's obviously cooled quite a bit since then. I mean, it's been out for what, 9 months now? A lot of CRPG fans have already beaten the main campaign, and here I am, still slowly making my way through it. In retrospect, I think that actually helps illustrate my main problem. Viewer retention is definitely the lifeblood of any YouTube channel, especially when it comes to gameplay videos. There's already a natural drop-off in viewer interest with any episodic series, and in my case, I end up exacerbating that with my fairly casual upload schedule. Look, I've been doing this for a little over 2 years now, and I think it's pretty obvious that I tend to take a methodical approach to just about everything I do. I don't like to rush or be rushed, and I like to make sure that I'm offering a decent variety of content. Unfortunately, that just doesn't really play well with YouTube's algorithms, or with the overall YouTube audience in general. One of the most common complaints I receive, aside from people who just don't like the way I talk or my style of presentation, tend to come from some of my most passionate viewers. Almost all of them have a favorite series, but they get frustrated because those series only end up getting new episodes on a weekly or even monthly basis. That goes hand in hand with the other main problem, which is that a lot of the games I talk about tend to have a very limited hype window. I mean, Kingmaker is a pretty good example of that. I was one of the very few people making videos about the beta, leading to a much bigger audience than I usually get. Logically, I should have taken full advantage of that, with at least 2 to 3 new Kingmaker videos on a weekly basis. Instead, I just stuck to my usual pattern, splitting my time between Kingmaker and a few of my other ongoing series, even though most of those other series were only pulling in a tiny fraction of the overall views and engagement that Kingmaker was getting. Of course, my intent was always to stick with Kingmaker for the long haul, but that didn't really take the hype into account. Those massively inflated numbers were only due to the very time-sensitive circumstances surrounding the beta. once the game actually launched a few months later, everyone started playing it. While my personal series does still have a fairly dedicated audience, it's obviously nowhere near the level of interest that I was seeing during the time leading up to the actual release. Now, I do want to make one thing very clear. This isn't all about the money. I mean, I'd be lying if I said that money wasn't a factor, but if I was really dead set on maximizing my profits, then I'd be doing things a whole lot differently. I'd be dumping any series that underperformed, I'd be jumping on every perceived controversy, and at the very least, I'd finally start accepting some of the sponsorship deals that keep turning up in my inbox. But, and let's be honest here, I'm just not comfortable with most of that stuff. I started this channel to help promote some of the upcoming RPG and strategy games that had caught my eye, and while the channel has obviously evolved quite a bit since then, I like to think that promoting indie crowdfunding projects is still my primary goal. I do love playing games like Battle Brothers, Darkest Dungeon, and Mutant Year Zero, but I really shouldn't let them get in the way of talking about some of these brand new projects. I end up skipping over a lot of potential projects because I'm too busy trying to maintain my already ongoing series. Of course, to a certain extent, that's exactly what a lot of my patrons are actually paying me to do, but then again, there's also a segment of my patrons who are specifically funding my channel because they want me to spend more time on these new and upcoming games. Anyway, I don't really want to belabor the point, but it might be time to try changing the way I've been doing things. Nothing too drastic, but we'll just call this yet another experiment in the long line of experiments that I've been running since I first started the channel. Looking over the release schedule for the next few months, we've actually got several high-priority projects coming up in rapid succession. We've got the Wasteland 3 Alpha coming out next week, followed almost immediately by Backer Build 5 for Phoenix Point, and then the full launch for Stygian, Reign of the Old Ones, in late September. These are all games that I basically built this channel to talk about, so I definitely don't want to end up skipping any of them. That said, what I'm thinking I'll do is clear my schedule before the Wasteland 3 Alpha drops on August 21st. That way, not only can I give the Alpha the proper attention it deserves, but I can also potentially complete the entire self-contained series in a very timely fashion, rather than dragging it out over the next several weeks. Depending on how that works out, I may try a very similar approach when Backer Build 5 comes out on September 3rd. Like I said, Phoenix Point still tends to dominate my performance charts, so it only makes sense to give it a little extra attention. Of course, I will still try to put out a few other videos, stuff like Battle Brothers and Pathfinder Kingmaker, but those are likely to become a lot more sporadic, at least for the short term. It also means that some of my other series, like Darkest Dungeon and Phantom Doctrine, are likely to go on temporary hiatus. These are series that we're already updating on an irregular basis, and I really do hate the idea of just abandoning them entirely. My current plan is to just hit the pause button while I deal with some of these higher priority projects, but I do want to get back to them eventually. Now, I do realize that this is going to upset a few of my viewers, maybe even a few of my patrons as well. As always, I do wish that I could keep everyone happy, but that's obviously pretty much impossible. The bigger the channel gets, the more varied and demanding my audience will become. And I just have to accept that I'm never going to be able to keep everyone happy. At the end of the day, I guess that's really what it comes down to. Some people will be upset if I talk about a game too much. Others will be upset if I don't talk about it enough. And then some people just don't care about that game at all and will get upset if I'm not talking about a completely different game instead. With that in mind, I think it's obvious that I'm going to have to make some pretty tough decisions over the next few months. And no matter what I decide to do, there are almost certainly going to be some consequences. I do want to keep my viewers looped in on at least some of the decision-making process, but at the same time, I'm the only one who has regular access to the channel's monthly analytics, and any decision I end up making needs to take the channel's overall growth into account. Anyway, I think you get the idea, so we'll just leave it at that for now. Be sure to let me know what you guys think about what I'm doing, what I've got planned, or just what you think about the channel in general. As usual, I'll read them all and I'll try to respond to everyone's comments. Though I will warn you, my schedule is getting pretty cluttered these days. Now, normally this is where I'd introduce one of my many cats, but at this point we've pretty much covered them all. Don't get me wrong, there's certainly a lot more that I could say about my current Clouder, but I actually thought we'd try something a little different this month. With that in mind, I'd like to introduce these two fuzzballs, Smudge and Rory. Unlike pretty much all of the cats I've talked about in the past, these two rough-and-tumble rogues are actually owned by two of my biggest supporters, Laura and Mike, who you may know better as Bunny and Fox. Now, Laura and Mike have both been following the channel since it first started back in early 2017. In fact, I think Laura was actually the very first person to actually subscribe to the channel, and she was also one of the first people to join the Patreon, or follow me over on social media. They also followed me over to Fallout 76, but well, the less said about that game, the better. More notably, she was also the person who kept prodding me about making a proper Discord server for the channel, and when I dragged my feet on that, she finally just went ahead and set it up for me. Granted, it's about what you'd expect. Just a handful of people, myself included, sharing memes and talking about the latest video game news. But still, it's something that I do enjoy being part of, and I don't think I ever would have gotten around to doing it if it weren't for her support. I was particularly saddened to hear that they lost both of their former cats late last year. I've owned over a dozen cats myself, and I know how hard it can be when you end up losing one of them, let alone two in rapid succession. I spent a lot of time talking to them about it, encouraging them to adopt new ones, once they felt ready for it. And as of last month, they finally decided to go through with it. So, here's to Laura and Mike, and to Rory and Smudge, who I hope will all enjoy their new lives together. Obviously, I'm just some mook on the internet who happens to spend his time talking about cats and games. But I did want to show some proper appreciation for all their support over the past couple of years. Of course, that's not to say that I don't appreciate all of my viewers. As usual, the channel wouldn't even exist if it weren't for folks like you in the first place. As always, I know I've said it before, but every time you watch one of my videos, leave a comment, or click the like or subscribe button, well, it really does make a difference. And, as always, I'm eternally grateful for it. I'd also like to give special thanks to my patrons. It's thanks to people like them that I can actually afford to keep making these videos. After all, making YouTube videos isn't actually as easy as it looks. There's a lot of specialized hardware and software that no one ever really tells you you're going to need. So, special thanks to my honorary raiders from back in July: A Normal Joe, Austin Fagan, Ben Hollingshead, Benjamin Gray, Bio Golem, Brad Quinn, Cecil Kane, Doman Anslovar, Kim S. Jensen, Mark Richards, Maximilian Monk, Mozzie Melton, Mr. Scar Lectures, Stepan Lovasic, The Cursed Typewriter, Tom Edward Idland, and Yokes. And extra special thanks to my veteran raiders from July: AdriRaven, Alois, Ash, Drakiith, Exsellsior, Forbidden One, James Trimmier, Jonathan Tanner, Laura and Mike, Leroynukenson, Mike Spark, Mildly Nuclear, Nod Goblin Nico, Valinrook, and Woe77. Oh, and, as usual, special mention to Revenant and Rowan Church, my Raider Lord and Captain respectively. Just like Laura and Mike, these guys have actually been supporting the channel since back when it first got started. If I ever end up losing their support, then that's when I'll know I did something very wrong. If you'd like to help support the channel, then you can do so by checking out the links to my PayPal or Patreon accounts down in the description below. As usual, you shouldn't really feel obligated to throw money at me, but you can be sure that I'll appreciate it if you do. Either way, I'm still just going to keep talking about the games that I love to play, at least until the channel collapses or the inevitable heat death of the universe. And on that cheery note, this is Retcon Raider, signing off. Thanks for listening. Oh, and remember, if you need to contact me for any reason, feel free to leave a comment on any of my videos. You can also reach me through my Facebook page, my Twitter feed, my Discord server, my Patreon account, or through my official email address. As always, links are in the description.